the other thing I loved about it, being surrounded by really smart people who were all really invested in building something really super fun. Having kids as your audience is just the most brilliant thing because they're most transparent about feedback, what they like, what they don't like.
Welcome to WITT. Hi, I'm Megan. I talk with founders, investors and operators working in tech. My aim is to inspire you with their stories and perspectives. Through this podcast, I want to amplify the voice of women working in tech. If you want to support WITT, then make sure you follow us on your favourite podcasting app. Then you won't miss any future episodes.
Today's guest is Divinia, the founder of London COO Roundtable. She has deep experience scaling businesses and now coaches and supports C-level leaders. Let's get into it.
Hi Divinia, welcome to WITT. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I would love to kick off our conversation with a lightning round. Is that okay?
That's brilliant. Yeah, let's go.
Awesome. Okay, question number 1. What would you say is the biggest red flag to spot in a leadership team?
A lack of challenge.
Lack of challenge. I like it. Question number 2. Which one do you think is more important, scale or sustainability?
Sustainability.
Nice. Okay, next question. Are you a mountains person or a beach person?
Probably a mountain person, I would say.
Okay, I like it. Controversial choice, but I agree. Okay, next question. What is the most tension between a CEO and a COO?
That's a great question. It's completely stumped me for a minute. I would say scale versus sustainability.
Okay, linking it back. I like it. The next question. What does operational excellence look like to you?
It's a really hard question to answer. I guess operational excellence is about the system working. So the business's system and the system working.
I like it. Question number 6. What is your favorite type of animal?
Probably a cat. And you could see my cats. But yes.
I love it. Yes, very on brand. Next question. What is a leadership behavior that you think is kind of the hardest to eradicate or get rid of? That's not a very good one.
Toxicity.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. Okay, question number 8. If you could give one rule for a scaling team, what would that be?
A minimum viable process, dependent on the stage of your business.
Okay, I like it. Question number 9. What breaks first when a company scales a bit too fast?
To be honest, I think it's the team, probably.
That would make sense. Okay, and then last question for the lightning round. If you had to kind of describe your entrepreneurial journey in 3 emojis, what would they be and why?
The little being sick emoji.
Okay.
Because it was scary enough to make you feel sick. The emoji with a party hat on, because I had so much fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. And then probably there's an emoji with a little monocle.
Right, yeah.
And I think because of curiosity, because I feel like curiosity was key.
Definitely.
From me and the other people around us.
Yeah, some great emojis, I feel like. So throwing up, party, and monocle. I think it's a good mix. Well, that was really awesome. Thank you for answering my lightning round questions. And let's now move into your journey, right? So you founded and you run the London COO Roundtable. Now, first off, let's get a little bit of what does that mean? Why did you build?
Yeah. So, I mean, I built it really selfishly because I was alone as a COO. So I had grown up in a business that I was in for a long time. And I'd been in my COO seat from being a junior member of staff to a head of ops and finance to a COO and CFO. I'd been in the seat for about a year. Mm-hmm. And I had this moment of like, okay, I feel okay in this role now, but I need more operators to talk to because there are problems I'm trying to solve that I'm solving from first principles that they have definitely solved before. Mm-hmm. So I'm reinventing the wheel for no reason. And also I was a bit I'm not entirely sure what the COO role looks like at its most successful. So what does good look like in this role?
Right.
And I didn't have enough operators around me in order to find that out. So I thought, go out and find a network for COOs. There were none. There was one in the US that I could find, but none in the UK. And there's many reasons for that. I think the COO role was very well understood in the US at the time and not so much in Europe, actually. And so I then thought, well, I've met sort of about 8 or 10 COOs through investors and my founder. I will bring them together and we shall start there. And even from the very first roundtable that we had together, it was phenomenal. It was amazing. They were in the same problem space as me. We solved problems together on that first day, and they understood the complexity of the COO role. And so I felt really seen.
Yeah.
And that was it. Then we were off. And because there was nowhere else for COOs to go, we then collected COOs. We just went along.
Yeah.
You should come.
Yeah.
And it grew really organically.
Pick them up along your way. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, I feel like with most problems, it starts with the individual person having that kind of loneliness or whatever it is, and then just kind of grabbing other people that have that same problem and being like, we should just talk to each other.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah,
fix
exactly.
each
We'll
other's
start
problems. Start somewhere, exactly. And you talked a little bit about it being quite a complex role, and that makes a lot of sense because it's around operations, and that's the operations of probably a pretty big company. So from your kind of experience, what would you say makes this role so powerful? And why do you think it's so, complicated?
So the power in the role, I think, comes from it being the only other role at C-level that's systemic, as in sitting next to the CEO, looking at the whole business. So working on the box, not just in the box. And the other roles, the other C-level roles, of course, they will have a view on the whole business, but they don't work on the whole business in the same way cross-functionally as a COO will do. So that's its power. Its complexity is that role is completely different dependent on the type of company you're in, the industry you're in, the type of CEO founder you work with, your own skill set, the size and stage of the business. And so actually, when you look at the COOs that are in the COO Roundtable, for example, they have different strengths and spikes. They think about things in very different ways. They're different. They have things that are common across the COO role. So this business having a remit of systemic operations across business, but they will likely look after different functions. So you might get one that is more product, for example, and that's especially true in gaming companies. You tend to get more sort of studio management type COOs, and then you'll get others who are more sort of, I hate the term, but traditional, which is people, sometimes finance, business operations, talent, that sort of thing. And they're called back office functions, even though I don't believe that either, which is that they are actually commercial functions if they're run the right way. But then you might get some who are more GTM focused. And that's been the GTM focus of the COO role. There are more of them more recently. That's like been a trend that has started more recently. But so they're completely different. So complexity on the one hand, but power on the other.
Yeah. And I mean, going into that, it seems like a really, as you said, complex and I would say very confusing and kind of chaotic in a way. But what would you say makes it kind of so rewarding?
Yeah. The brilliance of that role is how much you learn about a business as a whole, because it gives you the remit and permission to go anywhere in a business and ask any questions. So, and quite often you're partnering with other C-levels in their areas to help them and be an extra pair of hands. You're also usually very close with the CEO, but also you might be working at board level as well. So you get a very high level view of the company and the board are after. So really good stakeholder actives. And also you get to not only look across sort of systemic cross-functional relationships, so how the business sort of fits together in terms of information flows and all of this sort of good stuff, how the system is working, but you quite often then get to manage different functions when there may be an absent lead. So when I was COO and I was running my different functions, they were, because I'm hybrid CFO, so I was finance, people, business operations. Then I started managing data for a period of time. I managed product for a period of time. I managed marketing for a period of time. I managed tech for a period of time. That's not my wheelhouse. But it's so interesting that you can just parachute in and then get to understand all these different functions. Makes you a bit dangerous, depending on how well you know those functions.
Right.
But still, you really get to understand the problems of running those functions. So you can be very empathetic to the other C-levels that then look up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in my opinion, it sounds like a kind of dream role because you're really branching out to all different types across the company level. You know, you're not just fixed into one particular slot, let's say. You know, you're really like branching out and really exploring all different types of parts of the company, which I think is really, really interesting and really, really cool. But you've not just only spent your years as a COO, you're also kind of a coach as well. So coaching founders and coaching COO is as well. And I wanted to kind of understand, first off, what stage do you work at with founders?
Yeah, founders, it depends. I've worked with founders in early stage businesses, but also founders in Series A to E companies as well. And COOs the same. I mean, arguably you get less COOs in early stage businesses because they normally come in at the point where you've got Series A in a company and you're looking to scale. But you do get COOs in some earlier stage businesses, dependent on what that CEO profile is like. And if they're founders, you might have a founder COO in an early stage business. I'm sort of size agnostic. I'm also sector agnostic. And it's really about the people that I'm working with.
Right.
So different sizes of industries. So from very small seed stage all the way up to sort of like the Monzos and the Calms, the companies that have scaled.
Definitely. And would you say that kind of coaching and being really, again, crossed across all different types of industries, do you think that that's really helped with your better understanding different companies and bettering your role as a COO?
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting. When I coach COOs now, I quite often encourage them to take on advisory or board roles of some kind whilst they're in post, because I think, you know, my background, I had a very early career in a different space, but I was still in operations. I then went into Mind Candy and worked there for 10 years, and then I was at Pact for a couple of years after that before I retrained as a coach. But actually, so the number of organisations I've been in was limited, and when I was at Mind Candy, it was very limited. And I feel like when you start to then broaden your base of knowledge around how different companies work, that different business models operate in a different way, there's a different setup, the COO role is quite different in those companies. Something about it broadens your strategic horizons and helps you to think about the business in a much different way. Because also you're looking at the business thinking, oh look, this one runs this way, so Mind Candy runs this way, digital entertainment business. But if I look over at Pact, gosh, look, that's a physical goods business, it runs completely differently, and that COO role is totally different. And I do think this business of, as you're a growing COO, encouraging you to have a perspective on the business that you're in at a very strategic level. What's the market doing? Is the company doing the right things to stay competitive? Is it doing the right things in order to be efficient? And as you mentioned, to be sustainable, but still grow at a decent rate, and all of these different things. I think having an informed view of different businesses and how they work helps you to do that. And certainly there was something really interesting for me when I started angel investing. Actually, when I was at Mind Candy, I started angel investing in different businesses, and I would do a bit of advisory with those founders. It just blew my mind. I was something like, there's all these different types of businesses.
Yeah, definitely.
And they all work in very different ways. It kind of told me about it showed me how much I didn't know.
Right.
Which I think is entirely useful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the unknown, I feel like, is the most scariest thing that you can face, especially as a founder or a person in the entrepreneurial field or in a company. It's kind of not knowing is almost worse than knowing. I feel like it definitely is a lot worse, because then you don't know how to prepare, you don't know how to do anything. So I totally agree. And you were talking about Mind Candy, and that's the next kind of question that I wanted to go into. So obviously Mind Candy is can you give us a little description? What would you say?
So Mind Candy is a digital entertainment business, and it was actually in an era where digital entertainment was very, very nascent. So there were a few other comparables like Club Penguin, but they were very early as well. But we created a digital entertainment property called Moshi Monsters, which was for children between the ages of 8 to 12, roughly. But it's sort of skewed either side as well. And it was on Flash, so it was sort of a web game, but also then span off into merchandise. And we had a movie and a music album and all sorts of other stuff as well. But it was really super fun. And I was there pre-Moshi Monsters, so I became one of the founding team members of Moshi. So I was there from very, very scratch, which was also fun, because then you're building something.
Definitely. Yeah, I remember watching Moshi Monsters. It's a great part of my childhood, which is really,
Oh, I
really,
love that.
really, really cool. But I wanted to kind of understand, what was that kind of journey like? You already said a little bit about being the kind of founding team, but how was that different from your kind of previous roles or your kind of future roles, let's say?
Well, so my previous roles were in, I worked in antiques and interior design, so completely
different, yeah.
place. And really interesting physical goods businesses, still with entrepreneurs because they were owner-founded businesses, but going into a digital business was completely new territory for me.
Yeah.
Also a business that had no real processes or systems. It was like literally 15 people in a room. So I loved the fact that I got to go in and they were like, well, you can just sort of start it the way you want to start it. Do your thing. Do what you want to do. Set up your own systems and processes.
Right.
The other thing I loved about it, being surrounded by really smart people who were all really invested in building and building something really super fun.
Yeah.
Having kids as your audience is just the most brilliant thing because they're most transparent about feedback, what they like, what they don't like.
Yeah.
And also the fact that it delivered on the startup promise in the sense that it was fun. I met great people. I loved being part of a team that was small and growing, loved hiring new people in. And also I could take on different responsibilities in different areas because I wanted to. I would notice gaps. Like, for example, there was no one doing HR. Like when we were very early doors. And I was like, well, there's no one doing any people stuff. Can I do that? And of course, then it's like, yeah, sure. Because there's no one doing it. They're like, yeah, sure.
Exactly.
I go there. So it really meant that I could then put my own stamp on things and try things out. And if they worked, it was great. And if they didn't work, I'd learn. And it was fantastic. It was really fun. And I just think it was a better learning experience than most other things because you're learning about business as you build a business.
Yeah.
And the training I did I did different training later on in terms of I did some CIPD training for the people side. I qualified as a chartered accountant in my evenings when I was there over the course of 3 years. I love learning stuff, so kind of it makes a lot of sense. But it was great being able to apply that to a business.
Yeah.
Because actually that's how I would think I was able to do all of that training quite quickly because I could apply it in the business that I was working in.
Yeah, definitely.
Something about application.
I mean, I think about it from the way that you described it, I think about it in terms of like molding kind of clay, because it's very much at that like early stage. And they, from what you said, they basically said, come in and fix it, do something, right? So which is great because you're basically taking it all into your own hands and molding it how you hope it would turn out in the future, which is really, really cool. I wanted to ask, what would you say are some of the kind of lessons that you took away from Mind Candy as a whole from your time there, experience-wise? What would you say are the things you took away?
That the team is everything, and we were very diligent about hiring very talented people, but people who really deeply cared about what we were doing.
Yeah.
And there is absolutely no substitute for that, I think.
Mm.
And I absolutely loved the people that we hired and that we worked with, just because they were phenomenal. And we wouldn't have scaled as quickly because that business went from 0 revenue to 50 million over the course of a few years. I mean, it just absolutely flew. But we couldn't have done that without an amazing team of people.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have worked. It was incredible. And also, it was a very multidisciplinary team. So trying to create a level of empathy around all of these different people doing different things, and that they all needed different things, I think was challenging, but we managed it. So building a very inclusive culture around, finance people, lots of people, creatives, designers, tech people, moderation, customer service. I mean, just community people. We had a kind of really broad span of people. Licensing people to product designers. I mean, it's really broad. So trying to just make sure that we had a very inclusive culture around them. So definitely about the team. I think also this thing around in the lightning round, you asked me about minimum viable process. I learned that you can very quickly over process a business like that. And it is detrimental. As in, you can tie people up in process to a point where you're constraining them versus actually getting them to bring forward their ideas. And this idea that I was okay about the fact that I would design processes for certain stages of business and then I would redesign them again.
Right.
And I think sometimes people can get quite stuck in, well, I've designed that now, I've done that, I've checked that box. I never really looked at it that way. I looked at it as the people internally were internal customers for my processes, much like you would for a product if you're building a digital product. And so I would keep revisiting it, getting their feedback, understanding it's still working, especially still working because, we were scaling quite quickly and brought more people in. But there was that whole thing about mindfully scaling so the process didn't get in people's way. And I think we were really good at listening to our customers. So we have many ways to do that, including that we had a very, very good community moderation team that would listen to what the kids were saying and bring it back to us as well. But we also had multiple outlets where the team could go out and meet children face to face. So we had a Moshi bus where you go and work on the Moshi bus. We had different pop-up stores you can go and work on. We ran different community events that all of the different staff helped out on. You could go and work in the community moderation team for a bit, So there were different ways you could interact with the customers. And also I think that really helped, and parents as well, because also being a secondary customer. I think many amazing lessons from working there.
Definitely. I mean, from what you're telling me, I feel like it definitely is a very, very important part of your kind of background. And I feel like you can take away these lessons into kind of everyday life where it's a lot orientated around making sure that the customer or the people in the company are happy and working as well as they can be. And I think that's the utmost importance, especially in a corporate or startup environment, which is really, really good. We can probably talk about this for quite a while. So let's move topics into the kind of future of the entrepreneurial space, tech world. What are you excited about for the entrepreneurial space?
I mean, several things really. The especially around the COO role. The COO role has changed quite dramatically, but I think it's kind of in a good way, as in lots of the COOs in the roundtable and in other places being asked to be the AI architect in businesses. Bringing in AI in order to increase efficiency in operations, whilst also helping to grow the business, but be very careful about sort of making sure that it's profitable, sustainable, all of that sort of good stuff, being a cultural ambassador and all of that good stuff as well. So the COO role has gone from being, I think it got stuck in for a long time, processes, systems, all of this sort of stuff, to being a real sort of future looking efficiency building role. And the AI thing is just mad, as in I just am so excited about what it can do to help organizations to be more efficient and scale faster, but not in a way I don't think that means that people will be disadvantaged, as in if you think about what it can do in order to make all of those people better at their jobs, because it pushes them into areas where they can then display super strength, and it takes away basically all of the sort of admin repeatable and other tasks that will take up their time but not be most impactful. So I just feel like if I personally, it's one of the things that I kind of look at what the COOs are doing right now and I'm envious. I'm like, I'd quite like to sort of see how I could implement AI into a business and actually help it to make everybody in there, 10 times more productive. Definitely. So that's definitely huge, that whole area. Yeah. And it's all about how it's applied and how culture is adapted to ensure that it is adopted well and people see the benefits of it. Also really brings forward change management skills, which COOs have in spades normally. And so running AI as change management projects in their businesses from end to end. But I think that's super, super exciting.
Yeah.
And I think it means that COOs are able again to demonstrate how effective that role can be. There are certain instances in time where this happens. So, for example, where funding has been very constrained at different times, COOs then turn into a very valuable resource for being able to restructure businesses, because again, change management transformation skill set. So that is kind of one example. But again, I think the AI and all of the security and technical debt requirements, etc., go with that means that role then comes back to prominence.
Definitely. I mean, AI is probably the biggest buzzword in a while. So it definitely is a very valuable and helpful tool. And it is interesting to kind of see where it will take us, basically, and see what we can accomplish with its help, which is always really, really interesting. But let's dig into your frameworks, right? So as we said, you are a qualified coach. So I want to kind of understand what are some of your coaching frameworks?
Yeah. So I retrained as a coach about 7 or 8 years ago, and coaching is a fascinating discipline because there are multiple schools of coaching. And so you, as a coach, you may do a more generic senior coaching practitioner qualification of some kind, but then you get to sort of choose what you play around in. And so I've done a bit of work as a systemic team coach, and I'm accredited there. I'm a resilience coach, and I'm accredited there. So you sort of get to play around in some of these. My favourite coaching modality is transactional analysis, and I've been studying it for the last 4 years. I'm busy doing an MSc at the moment in organisational TA, which is a way at looking at human relationships, both one-to-one or in groups and teams, but also at an organisational systemic level. Absolutely love it. They use TA, it's used in psychotherapy, but also used in schools because in educational context, because the language of TA is very straightforward and the concepts and frameworks are quite straightforward as well. And I use it a lot in my coaching practices also because working with COOs and CEO founders, they're not just looking at one-to-one relationships. They're looking to figure out how organisationally they can make relationships work, connections, not only at one-to-one level, but, bigger than that. And so it's fascinating to use as a tool to help them to understand their organisations better and how to scale them and grow them in a really healthy way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, frameworks are a big part of this podcast because, obviously you can't just take someone's framework and then just implement it into your life. That's not necessarily how it works unless you have a copy of their life, which is very, very unlikely. So I feel like it's very important to kind of take from someone else's kind of structure and then adjust it and then implement it into whatever it is you're trying to give a bit more organization to, which is really, really important. And I think it's really cool being a coach. Yeah, as you said, it's a really interesting role because especially if you're a good coach. If you're a bad coach, then it's kind of like, well, you shouldn't be one. But if you're a good coach, then you can really bring about serious impact to that person or people's lives, which is really, I think it's really inspiring and really amazing. I think it's really, really cool. So yeah, no,
It is
definitely.
Amazing. Absolutely. The interesting thing is that, and I know lots of people are using AI for different sort of coaching uses as well. And I use it actually a lot in my coaching practice and for my Roundtable community. But it doesn't beat transformational change being about being in relationship. And this is why human coaches won't go away. Because developing a relationship with somebody so that you truly understand them is where transformation happens. And so that's sort of a core premise of coaching, of good coaching. I also, the other reason I love coaching models, but especially back to sort of TA, they're a set of maps. So this thing about exploring, using them to help you with direction, figure out where you've come from, where you're going to. They're a set of maps to help you to navigate yourself and others and your organisation as a whole. And I think that can be incredibly valuable so that you have different reference points along the way. And so I love frameworks. I always love frameworks, but I think there's something about how you use them as tools, understanding that they're tools, and really the real work is what you're doing within, reflecting, understanding, choosing, being choiceful, and using your own sort of intent and agency.
Definitely, yeah.
Fascinating.
No, I totally agree. It's hard as well. It's hard to kind of change something that's so kind of ingrained into your habits and the way that you do things. But yeah, no, it's really interesting. I feel like it's really powerful as well, which is really, really good. But let's go into story time, right? So I've been trying to decide which story I want to go for, and this is you're honestly the hardest one that I've had to choose from because there are quite a lot that we could do. So I'm going to leave it up to you because I can't really decide which one I want to go into. So I don't know if you remember the ones that you gave me, but it's so the earthquake or Buckingham Palace. I'm giving you little bits. And then or interior designer. So which one do you think you want to talk about today?
I think probably the interior design one is probably the sort of the most foundational for me.
Right.
And yeah, it was quite forming in terms of my career, but also a bit mad.
Okay. So you did your kind of, I would say, first career. Yeah, first career
Yeah,
as
first
an
career.
interior designer. You talked a little bit about this as well, and you did this for 6 years, so quite a long time. Let's talk about the people that you met and what you kind of learned from experience. Tell me about being an interior designer.
So I was actually an operator, but it just so happened that it was in different discipline.
Right.
So when I went to university and I studied archaeology, which on the face of it is not very useful. It was very interesting, however, yeah, interesting. And I was really into old stuff when I was a kid.
Fair enough.
My parents were really into old stuff, and we used to go to lots of museums and different stuff. And so I thought that maybe a career in archaeology would be really great, because
makes sense. Old stuff.
So when I came out of university, and during university I'd been on some different digs and stuff like that, and realised that I didn't actually want to be a digging archaeologist. So I was like, okay, old stuff, what do I do now? And then we had an idea that I could go and work in antiques and interior design.
Right.
Because in London there's a sort of a scene, as it were. I'd seen an advert in the paper for a job in the London Silver Vaults, which if you've ever been, it's in Chancery Lane. It's 2 flights underground in a bank vault that still exists. So you're like a little mole. You go down there in the morning and you don't come out until it's down in the dark, up in the dark in the winter.
Lovely.
But it was absolutely fascinating. And I worked for a guy who had inherited his vault off of his wife's father or her grandfather.
Okay.
Anyway, and he was an amazing guy, and I worked alongside him sort of as his operating partner. And so selling silverware, buying silverware, restoring silverware, and working with high net worth clients, including people like the Sultan of Brunei, who'd come over regularly and buy stuff from him. And the thing, I guess, and my career, and I worked for him for 2 years, and then I went to work at an antique and new furniture and lighting company over in the Pimlico Road in Chelsea. And again, really interesting. And I was sort of the operating partner to the founder there. Yeah. Both of these guys were brilliant. Both brilliant at running businesses, but also brilliant selling, and really lovely guys who then gave me a lot of their time in terms of mentoring, teaching me stuff. But also the shop in Chelsea, he had two shops in Chelsea. He also had a massive client base of high net worth individuals, people like Mick Jagger and Sharon Stone and Madonna and Claudia Schiffer. And so from a very young age, because I was only in my 20s, it was insane. Not only was it insane that we were dealing with incredibly high value goods that were then bought and sold, but also that people who were these incredibly famous figures would come in to the shop. And I, as a 20-something-year-old, would have to go over and serve them and be like, hello. And you recognise who they are immediately. And you're like, how are you? Can I help you? It was the scariest thing, back to sort of the being sick emoji.
Yeah.
It was that.
Definitely.
But it taught me so much, because in those environments, you running that business, you have to be so deliberate about everything. You have to be incredibly careful about how you deal with those customers. Right. You have to be very considered about how your premises look. We had to ship globally, so being very careful about how we were then shipping all of this very lovely antique new furniture and lighting and all of this sort of stuff. So it was incredible. And he also, the guy I was working for at the time, was a designer by training, and so he had a whole set of furniture and lighting that he was making from scratch. Wow. So we were using artisans in the UK to create stuff as they would have done back in the day. So making furniture frames from scratch, from really beautiful pieces of wood, having them hand polished, having them hand upholstered in traditionally naturally dyed leathers and fabrics and all sorts of stuff. So it was such an amazing thing to work on, because it just taught me so much about running a business like that with care and diligence. Also, because it was a physical goods business, it was always cash constrained. So you had to be incredibly careful about cash flow management and client management around cash flow and all of this other stuff. So, delivery times and what we were turning over and different product lines and pricing requirements, and all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a mini MBA.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind that I studied archaeology at university,
Right.
I did not know a lot about business.
Yeah.
So going into these environments was just suddenly like the most amazing learning curve where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's how you run a business. Look at that.
Yeah.
They were both turnovers in the sort of low millions, not small, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just incredible. The firm I was at in Chelsea for 5 years, it grew really nicely when we were there. We didn't have loads of staff, there were 5 of us, but it just did incredibly well because we were diligent and careful and just, looked after it really well. But I think it was really good grounding because I ended up at Mind Candy off the back of this because I had been multidisciplinary in that company and I'd sort of been across everything.
Yeah.
And then they wanted somebody who could be across everything again.
Yeah.
And whilst I was there, I'd sort of done some bookkeeping exams as well because I wanted to understand more about how you run a business financially and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always had this learning stuff. This is a bit like you and your podcast, learning stuff whilst doing stuff mentality.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I think that's a really cool first job, honestly, because it teaches you, as you said, teaches you so many different things and you're learning while doing and you're doing while learning. So it's a great idea. I feel like that's really, really cool. It's also a lot of pressure. I think that's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. Hence the being sick emoji.
Yeah, exactly. But that was really cool. Thank you for telling me about your story. It was really interesting. But we are sadly coming to the end of the podcast. But I do have 3 final questions for you. So the first one is, imagine it's 2036, so in 10 years' time. What does your kind of life look like? Where do you think you will be?
I will be a master coach because I'll continue learning while doing it.
Right.
And I will have brought TA to many, many startups because it's just such a powerful coaching model. Mm-hmm. And philosophy that I do genuinely believe that all the startup world will really benefit from it. And it actually hasn't penetrated the startup world too much, unfortunately, sadly. But that's my goal.
Love it.
More startup.
Okay,
Yay.
Very good. Okay, next question. How can listeners follow along with your journey?
So I'm quite active on LinkedIn. Because I also run the London COO Roundtable and it has an active page on LinkedIn as well as my own page. So I sort of share on there. I also love being a guest on different podcasts. So I've done that too. And also if you're a COO and you're looking for your tribe, then come and join the Roundtable and then keep up that way.
Exactly. Okay. And then last question, how can listeners be useful to you? So what can they do to help you?
Ensure that anyone who is a lonely COO who really wants to grow and develop and make friends comes my way.
Okay.
Because that's my whole MO is with the community is to ensure that we have a brilliant group of COOs who are learning, helping and supporting each other. So that's kind of my ask. If you know a COO and they're looking for their community and their tribe, chuck them my way.
Lovely. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'm really looking forward to following along with your journey, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. To make sure you don't miss next week's episode, follow us on your favourite podcasting app. Do consider leaving us a review as it helps the podcast tremendously.